Welcome to At Issue. My name is H. Wayne Wilson. Thank you so much for being with us. According to one analysis, 57% of the locks and dams on the inland waterway systems of America are exceeding their lifespan. Lifespan is supposed to be 50 years. We add about 25 years because they can be rehabilitated, renovated. And we're going to talk about the condition of the locks and dams on the upper Mississippi and, more importantly, the Illinois River, including the Peoria Lock and Dam just down by Creve Coeur. We're going to do that with two people who have a long history in looking at locks and dams. First, the Colonel. Colonel Mark Duchesne is the commander of the Rock Island District for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. He oversees 268 miles of the Illinois waterway, 314 miles of the upper Mississippi. I don't know how many locks and dams that is, but...
20 on the Mississippi and 8 on the Illinois.
Okay, and thank you for being with us. And also sitting across from him is Bob Sinkler. Robert Sinkler is the Water Infrastructure Director for the Nature Conservancy, and we thank you for joining us. We had an opportunity to go on a barge trip with both these gentlemen, as a matter of fact, and we were able to talk to a couple of people about the Peoria Lock and Dam in particular. We thought we'd show you that before we have our conversation.
Navigating the river has not really changed since the time of Sam Clemens or Mark Twain. It's the basics. Southbound traffic has the right-of-way, right? Same as it was back in the 1800s. Northbound traffic is obliged to stay out of southbound traffic's way to yield the channel, and that's been like that for 100 years.
They would know that at certain times of the year, because there were no locks and dams, the water would be so low that they would have to stop navigating. And so the lock and dam allowed a pool so that the boats then could run all the time.
Locking through, vessels will call in ahead of time, and what they'll do is they'll call on the marine radio saying that they request lockage. Once that's done, we will get the chamber ready for them.
Each barge is 200 feet long, so you can push three lengths of barges into that lock chamber, which is 600 feet long. Each barge is 35 feet wide. You can push 3 barges wide into that lock chamber. That is 110 feet wide.
We will swing the miter gates behind them, and once those miter gates have been swung and mitered, we will open the lower valves, and what the lower valves do is that drains the chamber, and it'll allow the water levels then to drop to the level of the pool below. And once that's been done, then the water is equalized between the lock chamber and the lower pool, and that allows us to swing the miter gates.
We lose a lot of time waiting around the locks. It's common to sit and wait 4 to 6 hours for my turn to lock, and then it's 2 hours to lock once I'm there. If it was a modern 1,200-foot chamber like we have in Mill Price, I can lock through in about 45 minutes.
The reliability of these locks with each year decreases.
The miter gates that I alluded to earlier, those are showing a lot of wear and tear. They leak, they have damage, and but currently the plan is in the works that they are going to be replaced, and so that's good news for us.
And we thank both Doug Morgan and Royce Wilkin of ARTCO for allowing us to talk about that. And we thank the Illinois Corn Growers Association for arranging for the barge trip that Todd Pilon, Alex Farrell, and I went on to bring you that story. Several things were mentioned, Colonel. One was the 1,200-foot lock. For the audience's benefit, we have a couple of them on the Mississippi, none on the Illinois?
Correct, none on the Illinois.
Just explain what we have a 600-foot, the transportation people would like 1,200-foot. What does that mean?
Well, what it means is, as you saw in the video, is ultimately efficiency of the system. So most barges, if you have a full load, we typically have 15 barges being pushed by a single tow. That exceeds 600 feet. And so they have to do a procedure known as breaking barge, and that's why the pilot that we saw in the video talked about 4 to 6 hours waiting and then an additional several hours just to lock through, because when he's pushing a full load of 15 barges, he has to push the barges into the lock chamber, break them because they don't all fit, back the others out, and then essentially lock through twice to get through that barge event. And so by having a 1,200-foot lock, you would really gain two primary efficiencies. One, you'd be able to go through without breaking barge, as I've described, and we would also be creating a secondary lock. On the Illinois and the majority of our locks on the Mississippi, it's one-way traffic. There is only an opportunity to go through one lock chamber. There are no detours. So if there is a problem with that one lock, we're out of luck. We can't move anything through up or down the river at that point in time. Adding a 1,200-foot lock at selected locations, the highest priority locations like Peoria and LaGrange, would allow for a secondary bypass or detour, if you would. If one lock chamber was down, you could just simply use the other as a secondary measure.
So with a 1,200-foot, as described, you'd have a 1,200-foot lock. The 600-foot lock would stay?
That is the current plan, yes.
So if the 1,200 was down, you still could go up or down river?
Correct.
Now, we've heard about this for some time, and we've got 75 years, as I mentioned at the top of the show, 75 years. We're past 75 years. These locks and dams were finished in the 1930s. Can the 600-foot lock be rehabilitated one more time?
Yes, it can be. It can be one more time. Obviously, there is probably a limit to the number of times you can rehabilitate any man-made object. But as you stated, they were all built around the Great Depression, and they were designed to last approximately 50 years. It's not an exact science. They have all been, as you alluded to, rehabilitated once, and they are all now essentially due or overdue for a second major rehabilitation if we weren't going to be replacing them. And as we just alluded to with the 1,200-foot lock discussion, there really is no plan to take these out of commission in the near future. The real plan is to stay on the rehabilitation strategy, and as necessary and as resourced, add select 1,200-foot locks at some locations.
I want to talk to you about funding of that and who's going to pay for the operation once, if the 1,200-foot lock is put in. But first of all, the audience might be sitting here going, let's see, Robert Sinkler, the Nature Conservancy. Why would the Nature Conservancy be worried about locks and dams on the Illinois or Mississippi River?
We're not as much worried about the locks and dams as we are as we recognize the importance of the navigation corridors to the aquatic habitat for many species, especially in the upper Mississippi. And what's happened in many places is that wetlands have been drained to support agricultural activities, and a lot of the populations of many aquatic species has now the habitat's kind of dwindled, and now it's right along the corridors of the navigation channel. So the Nature Conservancy has a huge interest in partnering with the Corps of Engineers and the Fish and Wildlife Service and the navigation industry to make sure that aquatic habitat is actually maintained to support the species that rely on it.
So if I hear you right, waterfowl and other animals are finding less and less area that's natural to them, and so they're gravitating to the waterways more so than ever?
And in some cases, the waterways and the navigation channel, which much of it was constructed in the 1930s, actually increased aquatic habitat and increased the area that was flooded, so it created more aquatic habitat, and nature has kind of adjusted to that man-made system all up and down the Mississippi River or the upper Mississippi River and the Illinois. So because nature has adjusted to that, we definitely, the Nature Conservancy definitely wants to help maintain that and support that and ensure that aquatic habitat is robust enough and maintained to the level needed to support the wildlife that depend on it.
I heard you use the term partner. There's a partnership between the Nature Conservancy and the Army Corps of Engineers?
There is, and it really is a great partnership, and it represents a much broader interagency partnership that the Corps is partners with almost a countless number of both non-governmental organizations and other governmental organizations. And the cast of characters, if you will, is very, very broad when it comes to interested parties on the watershed. And the Corps endeavors to be as expansive and inclusive as humanly possible. So the water resources portfolio that the Corps manages at the federal level is very much ingrained and inclusive with inputs from organizations like the Nature Conservancies, private organizations, carrier groups. And so as we look across the variety of interests and value that this great watershed delivers, navigation is but one. We're talking and alluding here to ecosystem restoration. Flood risk is obviously another huge endeavor that the Corps works with a broad array of partners to help manage, providing recreational opportunities, water supply, and water quality. So you can see the portfolio is very broad, and that necessitates the broadest inclusion possible of the partners and interested parties, because ultimately at the end of the day, we are executing priorities set by the people themselves. We're public servants using taxpayer dollars to invest in this watershed to deliver value and improve the quality of life for all American citizens. And that can't be done in isolation.
So how's the partnership with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers working from the Nature Conservancy's perspective?
Yeah, the Nature Conservancy is one of the largest partners, cost-share partners with the Corps of Engineers nationwide. And it's continuing to mature and develop. And not only do we have a partnership with the Corps of Engineers, we have a partnership with the Bureau of Reclamation, the Fish and Wildlife Service, USGS in many cases. And we'll just partner with any organization that has similar interests to ours. And we all really want clean water. We all really want aquatic habitat that will support the species that depend on it. So there's a great partnership that I think has been maturing and developing over the last several years.
The audience might be familiar with the partnership that's down at Emequon in Fulton County along the side of the Illinois River. That's between the U.S. Fish and Wildlife and the Nature Conservancy, about 10,000 acres down there. Can you give me some examples of where the Nature Conservancy has specific benefits of working with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers?
Yes, one of the efforts ongoing right now with the Corps of Engineers, and this is in the upper Mississippi, more toward St. Paul, Minnesota. But we're actually working with the navigation industry and working with the local Corps of Engineer district to manage water levels and pool levels behind the lock and dam, so it more accurately replicates natural flows. And what it does is it allows aquatic vegetation to be reestablished when we maintain those water levels in a way that more closely replicates nature, and then waterfowl, migratory waterfowl, benefit from that because they feed on that aquatic vegetation that is grown there. And we're doing it in a way that doesn't impact navigation. So those are the kind of things that we're looking for in ways to partner with the Corps. So the navigation channel and all the authorized purposes of the water infrastructure along the Mississippi River and the Illinois River, they can still maintain the authorized purposes that Congress established, but we can do it in a way that improves or expands environmental outcomes. And the Corps of Engineers has been very, very receptive to that, and so is the navigation industry. So we've got some great partnerships that are developing. Everyone wants a sustainable inland maritime navigation system, or maritime highway, and I think we're all working toward some very common objectives in achieving that.
From the Army Corps' perspective, how is that partnership working?
Well, it's working very well. There's another program, the Sustainable Rivers Program, that I won't get into the details, but it's another partnership opportunity between the Corps and the Nature Conservancy, and we're looking at the Des Moines watershed. It's one of our two main watersheds of Iowa feeding the Mississippi, to do some perhaps regulatory work in terms of how we're managing some of our reservoirs and other things that are impacting the environment. So really what the Corps does very little on its own. We almost always have a non-federal sponsor associated with the projects that we're delivering. Again, almost all of them are identified and authorized and appropriated effectively by the American people, but through the arm of the Congress. And so we execute and we inform, and that the inform part is kind of what we're doing right here today, and it's informing each other and our partners and working with partners who are interested in making improvements that deliver value not only locally but oftentimes regionally and nationally. So the partnership has been phenomenal with the Nature Conservancy, but it's absolutely critical in almost everything that we do to partner with either the Nature Conservancy and the broadest, again, array of water resources interested parties.
But there is a balance that you have to maintain because you're charged with maintaining a channel on the Illinois River and the Mississippi for that matter. You have to coordinate between the locks and dams along the Illinois and Mississippi so that if water levels are getting low in this area, you can't just say we're going to lower the dam at Peoria Lock and Dam.
Sure.
And then yet you still have to look to the Nature Conservancy or whoever the partner might be and say, well, how might this, difficult at times?
Well, it's extremely involved and difficult. And if you look at the disciplines and the assets, the resources that the federal government brings to bear within the Army Corps of Engineers, you really will find the broadest possible array of professionals within the water resources portfolio. Again, we have hydrologists and biologists and economists, navigation industry expertise, and again, we rely heavily on that partnership. So, we can't make those decisions in isolation because there are so many factors affecting this dynamic equilibrium that we're trying to operate within in terms of working with Mother Nature. One interesting fact that highlights your point is that the Alton lock and dam system on the Mississippi River just north of St. Louis is actually quite critical to the pool below LaGrange on the Illinois River to maintain navigation. And so there's two different Corps of Engineer districts working not only with other partners but even within its own organization to, again, maintain this dynamic system.
So, and I know you're going to be nice to him, but are you getting what you expected from the Army Corps?
I think this relationship is kind of developing and maturing over time. And we're just grateful that Congress allowed non-government organizations to enter into partnerships with the Corps of Engineers to deliver projects. And the Nature Conservancy is really part of the public-private partnership efforts that are being discussed right now on Capitol Hill. In many cases, we contribute money from our donors to actually execute environmental projects that benefit the Corps, the federal government, and of course the Nature Conservancy, and those that are interested in what we were doing. And I think it's just continuing to evolve and improve over time. And we're just grateful that the Corps of Engineers and other federal agencies have kind of opened up the way of doing business to include non-government organizations. So it's been very positive over the last several years since that authorization was granted to the Corps of Engineers and to the non-government organizations to enter into partnerships.
Let's talk about funding of the locks and dams. A tremendous expense. Basically, construction is a 50-50 partnership, is that correct?
New construction, if I might, there's really three things that we need to maintain a long-term reliable navigation channel on the upper Mississippi River. Third largest watershed in the world, a great geopolitical asset for this country. And so we need to do three things. We need to operate and maintain the system. We need to do, second, major rehabilitations. We've recently talked about that. And then at some point, we need to do improvements to the system. So right now, from a funding perspective, the federal government funds 100% of the operations and maintenance of the lock and dam system. We are typically funded very consistently, which is the good news. The not so good news is that we suffer, much like a lot of the infrastructure investments in this country. In terms of the Rock Island District, we receive somewhere about 1/3 of the operations and maintenance dollars that we require to adequately maintain the system to the highest possible standard. In the second category of major rehabilitations, we talked about that all 20 of the locks and dams in the Rock Island District are due or overdue a major rehabilitation. That requires cost share with the Inland Waterway Trust Fund, which is the gas tax many may be familiar with. That fund, much like our highway fund, believe it or not, listening to some of my Department of Transportation brethren, is in a little bit of trouble. We have a very high priority lock and dam project ongoing on the Ohio River. And that is receiving all of the funds from the Inland Waterway Trust Fund, leaving effectively none available for all of the other priority major rehabilitations that are required around the country. The third and final category of investment necessary for a long-term reliable navigation channel is improvements. And the good news here is that we have an authorization in this country for those improvements. It's the Navigation Ecosystem Sustainability Program. And very appropriately, this authority not only provides for these 1,200-foot locks and other navigation improvements, but calls for commensurate improvements in ecosystem. So it almost guarantees or builds in this balanced approach to navigation and ecosystem restoration, which has been a huge challenge for our country since the 1930s when we started the lock and dam system. That authority is there, but there has not been any funding against that authority for almost 4 years now. So we're really trying to inform both the public and our leadership that A, we want to avoid a possible deauthorization of that, and we'd also like to see the first construction dollars go into this $40 billion program, which really spells the future for our navigation system.
Mm-hmm. The funding right now, the private funding, comes through a trust fund that commercial operators on the river pay 20 cents per gallon of diesel fuel. Mm-hmm. They have indicated as an organization, I don't know that it's unanimous, but as an organization they're saying we would actually say we would put more into that, more than 20 cents.
Sure.
Is there discussion about that happening, and what does that do to the 50-50 split, or was that just new money?
Well, there clearly is interest. There clearly is discussion of that. That may be something that is taken up with the ongoing legislative development of the Water Resources Development Act. So we'll have to see what that entails. There clearly is interest, there clearly is demand. There's also a related discussion about the cost share percentages of individual projects or even overall. So there are a lot of people looking for a way to increase effectively the solvency of this cost share agreement that would allow a broader array of projects to be moving forward, because it's not lost on the users who pay that tax, and it's not lost on a lot of our great leadership, the importance of the Inland Waterway transportation system as a vital component of our national transportation infrastructure.
With regard to this partnership again, he just discussed the fact that you actually have some input, the Nature Conservancy has some input up front in how this evolves?
Sure. Every Corps of Engineer project that's being planned really is inclusive. The planning effort, they're very inclusive in the planning effort, and we're given an opportunity like many other organizations, state, federal, non-government organizations, interested parties to provide input. They don't have to necessarily take it all the time, but we're just grateful that they give us an opportunity to be involved with the planning. The Nature Conservancy's got about 3,500 professionals, and we do have expertise that we think we can provide input that would be extremely helpful and help make more informed decisions as we move down the road. And I just do want to reinforce that our nation's investment in water infrastructure is not even close to where it needs to be. The Nature Conservancy is not necessarily advocating that the federal government take on more responsibility, but the nation in some capacity, in some way, needs to invest more money in our infrastructure, whether it's new construction or whether it's increasing the operations and maintenance funding, which has been pretty much flat for decades. And the operations and maintenance funding that the Corps of Engineers gets is not necessarily focused on maintaining the navigation infrastructure. Out of that same pot of money, the natural resources are also maintained with that. And because of the current funding levels, we just don't think it's realistic to expect the navigation infrastructure to be the bill payer for some of that natural infrastructure that's associated with the navigation pools. And the funding levels currently are not sustainable. So we just have to find creative ways to address those funding issues.
Well, there is legislation. The House has passed a version, the Senate has passed a version. Senate Bill 601, House Resolution 3080, I believe it is. It's been languishing for a long time. The Senate passed it a year ago in its original form. What might that mean?
Well, again, you know, first of all, the prospects of Water Resources and Reform Development Act coming soon is always good news. It's important to note that the word of bill, in whatever its ultimate final form, is an authorization and not an appropriation. But that's the first step, and that generally does provide direction and focus for water resources investments moving forward, and potentially solutions. It opens up some doors, as Robert alluded to more flexibility in private-public partnerships. At least that's something being discussed. Because there's a large recognition that a different approach to strategic investment in our nation's infrastructure and the water resources infrastructure needs to be relooked. Options need to be opened up.
And with that, I'd love to continue the conversation, and you can continue the conversation in your living room, but our half hour is over for right now. We appreciate you joining us. We appreciate the expertise of Colonel Mark Deschênes. He is the commander of the Rock Island District of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and to Robert Sinkler, who is the Water Infrastructure Director for the Nature Conservancy. Thank you both for being with us.
Thank you.
I will note that the colonel is an active colonel, and Robert Sinkler is a retired colonel, and I am merely a Specialist 5 retired. So no salutes on the program, but we'll be back next week with another edition of At Issue. Please join us then.